Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, this is Robert Smigel coming to you today with Canada's podcast, where we talk to entrepreneurs who are making it happen here in British Columbia, Canada. As co-founder of Vancouver-based real estate software company Spark, Simeon Garrett has been responsible for landing some of Spark's top real estate clients in North America. Years of living abroad in Asia and building his experience in the real estate industry fueled his ultimate vision to transform and streamline how new developments are managed and sold. With an extensive background in selling and marketing property, Simeon has been involved in the sales of over 1,000 homes internationally, which helped bring Spark into more than 80 cities worldwide. Well, Simeon, welcome to Canada's podcast. Thanks for taking the time today to be here for all our listeners.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's get started here. I want you to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Are you from Vancouver, British Columbia? And give us the details on your current business.
Sure. Yeah, no, I was actually born in Toronto. But when I was about 6 months old, I actually moved to Asia because my family was living and working there. So they flew back to Toronto, had me as a kid, and then moved back to Asia, essentially to China, where I spent the next 16 years of my life, essentially. So I spent most of my life in mainland China, Hong Kong. And then for high school, I actually went to Malaysia. I was in a boarding school in a city called Penang.
Do you speak Cantonese or Mandarin?
When I was really young, I spoke Cantonese because I was in sort of junior, senior kindergarten in Hong Kong. And then I moved up to northern China where I pretty much transitioned almost completely to Mandarin. Yeah.
Ah, so you can speak both. Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
That's got to help in Vancouver, huh?
I mean, that's kind of how I got into all of this. Is I was living and working in China after university, and I moved to Vancouver, and I fell into real estate essentially because I was a white guy that spoke Mandarin and Cantonese.
Right.
And all the buyers at that point were, flying over from Asia and trying to buy property here, and it was just a really easy transition. Not something I had planned. It just kind of what I fell into, and I happened to be decently good at it.
Hey, if you got the skill set, use it. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us about Spark.
Yeah, so Spark kind of came about through that whole journey of me working with a number of big developers and helping them sell and market projects from North America into Asia. And it really came out of a frustration that I had with the industry itself, which, it was Excel spreadsheets, old legacy agnostic platforms, all things that I was using day to day in my job. And eventually I just got sick of, I got sick of traveling that much first. I was on a plane once every 4 weeks for about 2.5 years. And I just kind of came to this realization after meeting a group of guys that worked in tech that I had some expertise in this market. And I think I have an idea that could work. And I knew some of the initial clients that I think I could sell it to. And so really what Spark came out of was the ability to streamline, like you said earlier, the sales, marketing, and management of new development projects. So we work with developers and project marketing firms, essentially digitizing their process all the way from the early conception of a project. So when leads are registering on a website, managing that relationship all the way through to the, all the communication, the allocations of units, the purchase and sale, the digital document signatures, the disclosures, all the reporting, and then the completion of those units. So we essentially live as the back-end infrastructure for developers and project marketing firms.
Okay. Did you need financing to start this company, and how do you currently make money in the business now?
Yeah. So when I started Spark, I was quite young and a little bit naive, and I didn't know anything about venture capital, seed round financing. I didn't even know people raised money for companies. I just kind of started it as a business. Which now seems like a strange way to do something, but we didn't raise money for the first couple of years because I never even thought about it. We'd put some money away in the early days, and we were essentially self-funded for the first couple of years. And through that, we ended up getting into an accelerator program called Grow Lab. That essentially, after about a year and a half of graduating from that, we got our first basically line of credit from BDC for $150,000, and that was really what took the business from being a sort of idea into actually, being able to hire our first employees, sort of, being able to move out of my apartment, which was nice. And then transitioning now into, what is a much larger company than it was at that point. Yeah.
Okay. You are in an absolutely great market for real estate. Obviously, Vancouver is growing and it is a that's basically a big part of the industry there is real estate. I want you to give me a key piece of knowledge or information about your industry that our listeners can learn from.
Yeah, I think so. There's really there's a lot of information obviously out there that is not disclosed to the general public. I think in new developments, it's not like you can go and tour a house. These are homes that are being sold off of a piece of paper and a PDF. So it's not quite as transparent, I think, as a lot of other real estate industries. And I'd say the most interesting thing probably that I've seen is that, the best time to buy a unit is either to be the very, very first buyer or to be the very last buyer in most cases, mainly because people, developers have to hit construction financing. And so the early sales are really, really important. So they're usually going to be a little bit more aggressive to get those sales quickly so they can get their construction financing. And then at the very, very end, they just want to close the project out. So in the middle is kind of where you end up getting probably, I'm not saying you're going to get a bad deal. Most of these deals are still really, really good. But the best pricing you're going to get is going to be at the very beginning or maybe the very end of a project from what I've traditionally seen.
Okay, good. What is the long-term vision and what will your company look like in the future? Do you see the company expanding into other areas and where beyond Vancouver, BC, or even Canada?
Yeah, so we currently work in about 80 cities in North America. We've actually recently started to pick up clients internationally. We just signed some clients in Panama. We signed some clients in Costa Rica. We have clients in Dubai. We have some clients coming on from New Zealand. So it's starting to branch out more organically. But the goal for us really is to be the number one player in new development software. So that's been our goal, not just in North America, but globally. And so we're kind of building the infrastructure and a platform that really can speak to all of those different markets.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Vancouver and doing business there. What are the biggest benefits for you being an entrepreneur in Vancouver, BC? I want you to give us some of the good points about starting a company here, but I also want you to give us some of the tough things or challenges you've had over the years so our listeners can learn from them.
Yeah. And so I think, Spark's been around for almost 10 years now. And that was kind of before the Vancouver tech scene really started to take off, and it kind of transitioned through the Vancouver tech scene really becoming, quite prominent in Canada. In the early days, it was very, very hard to raise capital in Vancouver. So when we actually were trying to raise money, there was a lot of small check writers and not a lot of deals that actually got done. So it took, I probably did 500 pitches, to raise our first $1 million, which really is a ton, isn't it? More than I would ever do now at this point. And so I think in the early days, it was just a very immature market as far as the tech world went. Even though it was a very strong real estate market, which gave us a decent advantage, it was hard for us to raise money, and that was kind of a challenge. But I think the benefit of Vancouver also on the flip side is that you have people are in Vancouver because they want to be here, right? It's not because they have to be here. It's because they come from Toronto, they moved to Vancouver because they like the mountains, they want to ski, they want to be on the water, they like the weather. So you end up getting a lot of interesting talent that in some cases is a lot cheaper and, it's easier to acquire good talent in Vancouver, at least historically, than it was in places like Toronto or New York or Seattle or places like that. Just because people are willing to take the cut because they actually want to be in the city. But I think that was what I found in the early days. And we have some of our best employees that have been here. 99% of the people that work for Spark live and work in Vancouver. And so we're a pretty much 100% Vancouver based company.
So it's easy to draw people in saying, hey, do you want to work and live in Vancouver? It's a great opportunity. And usually the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Based on lifestyle.
Exactly. It's a total lifestyle city, and I think it also lends itself to a good work-life balance, right? People here are generally, I think, a little bit happier. Maybe they're not working the 18-hour days, but I think when they are working, they're more productive, and they're also able to do a lot of extracurricular outside of work stuff that keeps them sharp and, keeps people in shape, and the health of people is better generally. And I think the mindset for the most part is really positive here.
Good. Okay, Simeon, you've been doing this for 10 years now. You've learned a lot. You've been through the ups. You've been through the downs. You've seen a lot. But I want you to go back to the beginning. If you were to start all over again and you just moved here to Vancouver, BC, but this time you don't know anyone, knowing what you know now, what would you do and how would you go about starting all over again as an entrepreneur? So would you do anything differently? Would you do the exact same thing? Was there things you felt, gee, I wouldn't make this mistake again? I do this differently. Anything like that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I actually I did a talk not too long ago, and people were saying, if you change basically the same question, what would you change, or what would you do, or what's your advice for people coming into this? And I think really looking back, I would have saved myself a lot of headaches if I had figured out how to pay taxes properly for a company. And I think that was a really big thing that I didn't know when I started Spark. We didn't know, it was kind of like the wild, wild west. I didn't know how to set up a GST account. I didn't know how to file taxes properly. And it kind of got us into an interesting point in our early days, because we kind of were just running off of an idea of a business. And so, I would have structured those types of things obviously a little bit better, because it would have saved us a lot of headache in the future. But generally, I really can't complain. I mean, I got really lucky with a super solid team. 4 out of the 5 people that I started with are still at the company. And they're kind of the foundation. And I think I came out of that, really, really lucky at the very beginning.
Okay, let's talk about your routine. Entrepreneurs are very routine oriented. What does the first hour look like for you when you get up in the morning? Do you have a specific routine or a ritual that helps you get motivated to start your day?
Yeah, I'm really not a morning person, to be honest. I'm a night worker. I'm a night thinker. I stay up late. That's my quiet time. That's when I get a lot of stuff done. The morning for me, I really have, usually my first hour of my day is just blank. I don't really check my email usually first thing in the morning. I have a coffee. I take my dog for a walk. I kind of clear my head. It's not really, I don't really turn on my brain till probably at least 9:30. So I think, the beginning of the day for me is really just it's a slow burn into getting my brain into a place where I can actually start to make some real decisions. And I've never been a morning person. So I'm almost the opposite. The last hour of my day is probably my most productive, where I do my reading, I do my research, I watch, updates and on the market, I look at architecture. That's kind of when I'm really diving into a lot of the, things that I think a lot of people might do as their first thing to kind of get their day going.
Plus, you're in a global business, right? So are you taking calls late at night as well? Is it, or you just have a cutoff? I mean, do you have a
little bit of both? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have clients that are kind of all over the place. I'm not really answering a lot of those calls, but I'm getting emails. I like to respond to emails that, whenever I get them, usually as soon as possible. And so again, if I get an email at 1 a.m. and it's something important, I'm going to answer it and I'm going to respond to it because my brain is kind of on then. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think entrepreneurs have to be weird or unique in a positive way, or are wired differently?
I think yes and no. I think where, my definition for entrepreneur is probably different than I think what the general entrepreneurial term. I mean, if you had asked me if I was an entrepreneur when I first started Spark, I would have said no, because I didn't even really know what that word meant. I was just a guy with an idea that started a business. And I think there's a separation between being an entrepreneur and having a business. I would say now I've become much more of an entrepreneur in the way that I think. But I don't think you necessarily have to be weird or quirky. I think most of my friends group, have their own companies or run their own companies. And yeah, some of them are a bit weird and some of them are just pretty normal guys. But I think if you think about trying to become an entrepreneur, that's where it becomes really hard to be an entrepreneur. I think those things just have to fall into place naturally. And I think it has to be something that you generally associate with and you're passionate about, that you are specifically, have a real good way to try to solve that problem, instead of trying to create a problem that you then try to solve.
Okay. Entrepreneurs love to read and learn and educate themselves. What books are you reading now and why, or even audiobooks, podcasts? Can you recommend any books for our listeners who are also entrepreneurs?
Definitely. I'm a big audiobook for sure. So I like to listen to books while I walk my dog. That's really what I do. On the way to the office, I listen to audiobooks. On the way home, I do the same thing. I'm a big autobiography fan, so I love reading about real life stories of real people. Right now, Ticket to Ride, Story of Disney, huge one that I really I just finished that, but it's phenomenal. Barry Schwartzman's story from Blackstone is another one that I really, really enjoyed recently. One that's a little bit more off the cuff that I started, which is kind of not really in line with that, is called The Economy of Misfits, which is really a way to look through an entrepreneurial lens from non-traditional industries like the mob or pirates or things like that. And so that's one that I actually found kind of interesting recently. And then my mom actually gave me that book for Christmas. So the only non-audiobook that I have.
I could recommend for you Shoe Dog, Phil Knight. Have you read that one?
Oh, I've read Shoe Dog. Awesome. Yeah.
That's one I really like.
Yeah.
And any online or offline tools you use on a daily basis?
I mean, Slack is a huge one. I mean, my entire company essentially is run through Slack. All of our messages, all of our history, all of that stuff. I mean, it's probably one of the big pieces that I use. I mean, as far as just the app ecosystem of Apple for sure is really big for me. Everything from mail to the text messaging to FaceTime. That's a huge one that I use, but I don't really use a ton of apps. I'm not like I use the general notes app and things like that, but I don't have, a bunch of these like quirky, funky little things like a lot of my friends use. It's not really how my brain works.
Okay. You touched on this earlier. Vancouver, British Columbia being a lifestyle city. How do you balance work and how do you relax and not think about work? Do you ski, bike, kayak, golf, hike, or simply go for a drive?
In the summer, I bike a lot. So I have a Peloton and I actually just kind of got pretty into the Peloton worlds, which is kind of addicting in a good and a bad way. I definitely ski as much as I can. So I try to get up on the mountain. Being in BC, some of the best skiing in the world is, within an hour and a half of Vancouver. So I definitely try to get up as much as I can there. And then, I also play soccer and I play tennis. Obviously, when it's raining, it's not as ideal, but those are two things I definitely, spend quite a bit of time doing in the summer.
Okay. If you weren't doing what you do now, what would you like to do for a profession?
I would like to build, run, and manage hotels. Okay. That's always been the thing that I think one day when I, if Spark sells or I somehow come across a huge chunk of cash, I'd love to build my own hotel at some point and run it. I love the hospitality. I love the food and beverage world. I love travel, and I like that experience of creating, relationships with people through a business like that.
You're a people person, an extrovert. Would you say?
Sort of, yeah. I think I am, and I'm not. I'm an extrovert as long as I have enough time for myself to be alone. I can't be out all the time and seeing people all the time. I need that time to just like decompress and download. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say I'm definitely more on the extroverted side.
What kind of job would you not like to do? Couldn't do it.
Oh, I mean, there's probably a lot that I wouldn't want to do. I would not want to be a flight attendant because I think I would just have huge anxiety about not being able to enjoy the places and getting to go to them all without being able to actually be there. I think that's probably one that I definitely would not want to do.
Okay. In business, what is your favorite word, quote, or sentence that you like to use? Is there anything that you use a lot with your employees or clients?
I'm not like a huge quotes person. I mean, I only really have a couple of quotes that I use, and a lot of times with my family. One that I really resonated that I've always used since I was a kid is actually a saying from Mao Zedong in China, and it's when approaching a tiger, use a long stick, which you can interpret that in a lot of different ways, and I've definitely used it in a lot of different ways, and I actually kind of find it more of like a funny approach to a quote. It's not something serious, it's not something inspiring, but it's kind of one of those sayings that I use when I'm a little bit unsure about a problem or something that I'm trying to figure out. And I don't know, I always found a lot of the writings of Mao to be pretty interesting.
Okay, what's your least favorite word or sentence you do not like to hear?
Anything with the word synergy in it. Probably my most hated word in the world. I hate it. Yeah.
If you had to pick one or two words to describe yourself, what would it be and why?
I would say particular is definitely the way I would describe myself. I really like the things that I like. It doesn't mean they have to be fancy or cheap or interesting or not. I'm just a very particular person in what I like to eat, where I like to go, how I like certain things done. And then I'd also say probably passionate. If I like something, I'm very much all into it, and I will put all of my time and effort and brain power into understanding it better. So I'd say those are probably two, and they both start with P, I guess. But those would be my two words that I'd say probably describe me pretty well.
Anything keeping you up at night these days? Does business go to bed with you, or you just drop it and worry about it in the morning? Are you getting up in the morning, writing on a journal, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty low low stress person. I mean, I grew up moving around a ton when I was a kid, being thrown into all sorts of situations, and I don't carry a lot of stress generally. And so I don't really get, that type of anxiety going to bed or holding things with me. I really like, sleep is sleep. When I'm tired, I pass out. I wake up, it's a new day. I don't tend to draw those things with, unless sure, if we're going through a big financing or something, of course, I'm going to be thinking about that. But generally speaking, across the board, I don't really get kept up at night by, work related things.
Okay. Do you have any advice that you may have received that you can pass on to entrepreneurs throughout Canada? Has anyone ever told you anything or said anything that you kind of resonated with you that said, I think that's some really good advice, maybe more than one?
Yeah, I mean, probably a couple of things. I think one thing that I've had that I've seen to be true that I never believed when I was, in the earlier days is that, everything is going to take 3 times as long and cost twice as much. One of my mentors in the very beginning, a guy named Mark, actually told me that, and it is proven to basically be, true, if not, even on the lighter side. If you think something's going to get done, times it by 3 when it's going to get done. If you think it's going to cost this much, times that by 2, and always plan for that, because that's just the way the world works. Nothing happens as easy as you think, and you kind of got to be ready for that. And that's one thing that I've always kind of, I hate it because I don't like things being pushed. I don't like it when, timelines aren't hit, and I don't like things going over budget. But it's just kind of the reality of the world of being in any sort of startup or entrepreneurial organization. This stuff just takes a lot longer than you think.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if I give you one more, I think, make sure that people are the core of whatever you're doing, and working with a good group of people is the difference between a successful company and just a great idea. And I think that, making sure that you build and you care and you understand the needs and wants of the people around you, and making sure they understand the same thing about you, and put a lot of effort and time into those relationships, because those are really the ones that are going to carry you, even though you're also carrying them at the same time.
So you're talking about clients, people that work with you.
I think across the board.
Industry,
yeah.
Across the board. You're a people person in a way that you identify the fact that we are in a business and people are the most important thing that comes along with that whole.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, look, Spark sells a pretty, from a consumer perspective, a pretty boring product, right? We're not something you're going to go into the store and be like, oh, that's so cool, or that's sexy, or I like it, I understand it. We're an infrastructure CRM backend management platform, right? That's a mouthful for anybody that, half my friends don't even know what I do exactly. But the way to get around that and make that interesting and sell it to people, is through the relationships you can build around that with people that are in the same world, and also the people that work with you and the people that you work for as well.
Do you think starting in Vancouver with its robust real estate economy gave you the rocket fuel to expand rapidly into other markets?
I think from the outside, I think that's probably a true statement. But I think internally, it was actually when we signed our very first big New York client was really what gave us the propulsion to go, much, much faster. And Vancouver is a small world, but it's a very cliquey world. It's a very insular world. Vancouver doesn't really do anything outside of Vancouver. Yeah. And that is good if you're in it. But if you're not in it, you're trying to break into it, it can be really, really tough because there's a lot of tight bonds and tight relationships. So, working in Vancouver has been, amazing, but it's also been really, really tough because being a newcomer and trying to start something in the city, it's hard to get into those circles. Whereas, the East Coast has proven to be a little bit more, hey, if this is a good business, let's give it a try. Mm-hmm. It wasn't as much about, well, who are you? Why do I trust you? Et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think yes and no, it's been a phenomenal place, but also it's been really challenging.
Has networking pre-pandemic, been an important component to expanding your business, not just in Vancouver, but globally?
100%. I mean, 35% of all of our deals, even to this day, come from referral. And that referral has been, friends of friends or people that we've met or, from conferences or events or dinners, and keeping those relationships up. And so I think 100% networking has been a huge factor into, what's helped Spark grow.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap things up. Simeon, how can our listeners get hold of you? And is there anything you'd like to add before you leave us today?
Well, pretty easy to get a hold of me. I mean, Simeon at spark.re, and that's SIMEON at spark.re. We just launched our brand new website and did a brand revamp as well. So that just came out within the last couple of days. So I mean, if I'd love to hear feedback on the website, on the brand. I mean, we've had the same brand for quite a while now, and I think this was a really big internal push that we put out there. And it was a huge team effort for all of us to get out there. And do that. So yeah, I mean, everything's on the website, spark.re. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. We're pretty active, and I'm kind of in and out of all those channels.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you for coming on the show. I've learned a lot about you, and I'm sure our listeners have as well.